I switched off the movie halfway because my boyfriend wouldn't quit ridiculing it. That minor argument somehow escalated into the police turning up at my door. Wyatt and we had this thing. This sacred ritual we called Movie Day. It started during the pandemic and, honestly, it was one of the best parts of our relationship. Whenever our days off lined up, we'd spend it together. The rules were simple. We took turns picking, no arguing about the genre, and absolutely no vetoing, unless it was something ridiculous like a 4-hour documentary about cement production. Whoever's turn it was got to choose, and the other person just watched. At least, that was the idea. Those early days? Man, they were gold. Most of our movie days were at my apartment. I had a decent TV and a big couch. Wyatt would show up late morning, sometimes with ridiculous, off-brand snacks, sometimes empty-handed, just expecting me to have food ready. We'd order takeout, make microwave popcorn, dim the lights. It felt so easy us. I remember one of the first times, he dumped a huge bag of random chips and candy on the coffee table and, with a grin, called me movie queen. It wasn't my turn to pick, it was his, and he spent 10 minutes scrolling, making dramatic thinking faces while I made fun of him. "This is serious business," he'd say, pointing the remote at me. Eventually, he picked something random, and we just sat there, passing snacks, making stupid comments. It was comfortable. It felt like our little tradition. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, things shifted. It started with little comments, quiet muttering, sarcastic observations, but only when it was my turn to pick. At first, I didn't think much of it. But after a while, I couldn't ignore it. We'd be 20 minutes into something I'd chosen, and suddenly he'd lean forward, "That doesn't even make sense." Or shake his head, "Wow, massive plot hole." Sometimes he wouldn't even wait that long. Once, he actually paused my movie to explain why the opening scene was bad writing. I just sat there with my popcorn, thinking, why are we doing a film critique right now? Another time, he kept doing this exaggerated sigh every few minutes, a loud, dramatic ugh. After the third time, I asked, "What?" And he'd just shrug, "Nothing, just bored." Then he'd go back to watching for about 30 seconds before making another comment. "This character is so stupid. Why would they do that? This movie is trying way too hard." The worst part was, it never felt like he was joking. It always had this tone like he was genuinely annoyed that he had to sit through something I chose. It felt less like a shared activity and more like I was subjecting him to torture. Meanwhile, when it was his turn, I watched. Even if I didn't like the movie, even if I thought it was slow or confusing or just plain weird, I'd just watch. I didn't interrupt the story every 5 minutes to explain why I thought it was bad. Because I figured, if he picked it, it probably meant something to him. But for some reason, Wyatt never seemed to apply that same logic to my choices. It slowly became this thing where I'd almost feel nervous when it was my turn to pick a movie, like I was bracing myself for commentary. And every time it happened, it chipped away a little more at something that used to be so much fun for me. A good example of the difference happened a few months ago when he picked The Fountain. Oh God, The Fountain. If you haven't seen it, it's one of those movies where there are like 3 timelines happening at once, space bubbles, people whispering about immortality. I spent the first half utterly lost, quietly thinking, are these the same characters or different people? But I didn't say anything. Wyatt was completely locked in, sitting forward on the couch, elbows on his knees, watching the screen like it was the most important thing in the world. So, I just sat there and watched with him. At one point, he glanced over and asked, "You following it?" And I said, "Yeah, mostly," which was generous. Truthfully, I was confused for most of it. But I still didn't interrupt. I didn't sigh loudly. I didn't pull out my phone. I didn't start pointing out plot holes or tell him the movie was slow. I just watched it with him. When the credits rolled, Wyatt leaned back and let out this satisfied little breath. Then he turned to me, buzzing. "So, what did you think?" I paused, not because I was trying to lie, but because I didn't want to crush his feelings if he really loved it. So, I said, "It was interesting." He nodded like he expected that answer. Then he spent the next 5 minutes explaining what the movie was about, how the timelines connected, what the ending symbolized. He clearly loved this movie. And honestly, that was kind of nice to see. Even if I didn't really enjoy the film itself, I liked seeing him excited about something. So, I sat there and let him explain it all without interrupting. I didn't say, that doesn't make sense. I didn't say, this movie is trying too hard. I didn't say, this is boring, because it was his pick, and that meant something to him. That's kind of the whole point of taking turns picking movies, right? You watch something the other person likes because you care about them. At least, that's how I always thought about it. The problem was that Wyatt didn't seem to treat my picks the same way. After a while, the commentary during my movies started getting old. So, one night, when he started doing it again, wow, this dialogue is terrible, I finally said something. I paused the movie and looked at him. Can you not? He looked confused. What? Just, can you stop talking through the movie? He leaned back, shrugged. I'm just saying what I'm thinking. I know, I said, but it kind of ruins it if you keep criticizing it while we're watching. For a second, he didn't say anything. Then he gave this long, exaggerated sigh. Fine, he said. And technically, he did stop talking. But the energy immediately changed. He crossed his arms and stared at the screen like he was being forced to sit through a lecture. About 5 minutes later, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I glanced over. He was scrolling through something. Are you seriously on your phone right now? He didn't even look up. Well, if I'm not allowed to talk, what else am I supposed to do? I paused the movie again. You could watch it. He rolled his eyes. I'm trying. That kind of thing happened a lot after that. If I asked him to stop criticizing the movie, he'd either start sighing loudly every few minutes or go completely silent and check out, glued to his phone the whole time. And somehow that almost felt worse than the comments. Because it made it really obvious he didn't care at all about what we were watching. It started feeling less like we were spending time together and more like I was just sitting next to someone who was waiting for my turn to be over. I didn't realize how much that bothered me at the time. But looking back, that was probably the beginning of the end. A few weeks ago, it was my turn to pick again. We had both ended up with the same day off, which didn't happen that often anymore. Wyatt came over, flopped onto the couch. What's the plan today? Movie day, I said. He stretched and grabbed the remote. Whose turn? Mine. He raised an eyebrow like he was already bracing himself. That should have been my first sign, honestly. I went to make popcorn, already knowing what I wanted to watch. There's this movie called The Bridge to Terabithia. If you've seen it, you know. If you haven't, it's technically a kid's movie, but it hits way harder than you expect. The first time I watched it, I was probably 11 or 12, and I remember crying so hard my mom had to check on me. It was the first movie I ever saw that made me realize movies could make you feel something real. It wasn't the greatest movie ever made, but it was important to me. I brought the popcorn into the living room. I'm picking something a little different today, I said. He glanced at the screen. Oh boy. It's not that weird, I replied. What is it? The Bridge to Terabithia. He frowned. Isn't that a kid's movie? Yeah, I said, but it's actually really good. It really stuck with me when I was younger. He shrugged. All right, your pick. I remember saying one more thing before I hit play. This one's kind of special to me though, I said. So just try to actually watch it. He nodded casually. Sure. So I started the movie. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. But then, it began. I'm not exaggerating when I say it was probably 10 minutes in. We were still in the early setup, introducing the characters. Wyatt shifted on the couch and let out a long sigh. Wow, he said. I didn't look at him, hoping he'd just stop there, but he didn't. This is really a kid's movie, huh? I kept watching the screen. Well, yeah, I said. I told you that. He gave a small laugh. No, I mean like, really a kid's movie. I glanced at him. What's that supposed to mean? He shrugged. It just feels super childish. I tried to brush it off. It's the beginning of the movie. Yeah, but like, he waved at the TV. The dialogue is so basic. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen and hoped he'd drop it. But about a minute later, he spoke again. Also, why are these kids acting like this is some huge adventure? They're literally just walking through the woods. That was the second comment in under 2 minutes, and I could already feel my patience thinning. Wyatt, I said quietly, can you just watch the movie? He leaned back into the couch cushions. I am watching it. Then stop talking through it. He looked at me like I was being unreasonable. I'm just commenting. Yeah, and it's kind of ruining it. He let out another dramatic sigh. Fine. For about 30 seconds, he was quiet. Then one of the characters on screen said something emotional to their friend. Wyatt chuckled. Wow, deep. I turned my head slowly and looked at him. Seriously? What? Just watch the movie. He raised his hands like he was surrendering. Okay. The silence lasted maybe another minute. Then he muttered, this pacing is so slow. I closed my eyes for a second. Wyatt, I'm just saying. I know, I said. You've been saying. He shrugged. Well, if it's boring, I'm going to say it's boring. At that point, I could feel myself getting irritated in that very specific way where you're trying not to start an argument because technically he wasn't yelling or being aggressive. He was just constantly dismissive. And it was happening during something I had already told him mattered to me. About 20 minutes into the movie, I started getting that sinking feeling in my stomach. Not because of the movie itself, but because I knew what was coming later. If you've seen The Bridge to Terabithia, you know exactly what scene I'm talking about. The moment where everything changes. The moment that absolutely destroyed me when I watched it as a kid. Even now, years later, I still tear up at that part. And sitting there on the couch next to Wyatt, I started imagining exactly how that moment was going to go. The scene would start. The emotional buildup would happen. And right in the middle of it, Wyatt would say something like, wow, that's dramatic. Or, okay, this is ridiculous. Or he'd laugh. Or he'd pull out his phone. And just the thought of that happening made my chest tighten because that scene was one of those rare movie moments that sticks with you for years. It was something I wanted to experience again the way I remembered it, not with someone next to me mocking it every 30 seconds. Wyatt spoke again. Seriously though, he said, nothing has even happened yet. That was when I realized something. If he kept doing this when that scene happened, it was going to ruin the movie for me. Not just for tonight, possibly forever. And that thought made me more upset than I expected. At some point, I stopped paying attention to the movie completely. Not because the movie wasn't good, but because I was sitting there waiting for the next comment from Wyatt. It had gotten to the point where every quiet moment in the film made me tense up because I knew he was about to say something. Another sigh. Another sarcastic remark. Another, wow, this is slow. I kept glancing at the progress bar on the screen. The big moment in the movie was coming soon. I could feel it getting closer. Wyatt shifted next to me again. This movie is like aggressively boring, he said. Something in my chest just snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just that quiet moment where you realize you're done. I paused the movie. Wyatt didn't even notice at first because he was still talking. And I swear nothing has happened for like 30 minutes. Then the screen went black. I had picked up the remote and turned the TV off. The room suddenly felt weirdly quiet. The only light was coming from the window. For a second, neither of us said anything. Wyatt turned his head toward the TV, then toward me, then back at the TV. What are you doing? I was still standing next to the couch with the remote in my hand. I turned it off, I said. He blinked. Yeah, I can see that. Then he frowned. Why? I didn't answer right away, because I was trying to figure out how to explain something that felt stupid when you said it out loud. Finally, I said, I don't want the movie ruined. He stared at me like that sentence made absolutely no sense. What does that even mean? You've been talking through the whole thing, I said, and I know when the big part of the movie happens, you're going to do the same thing. He leaned forward slightly. So, your solution was to just turn it off? I nodded. Yeah. There was a pause. Then he laughed a little, not in a nice way. Wyatt was still staring at the blank TV screen. Then he looked back at me. I don't get it, he said. What do you mean you don't want it ruined? I sat back down on the couch, but kept the remote in my hand. This movie has a really emotional part later, I said. Like, the part that actually matters. He shrugged. Okay, and you've been talking through the whole thing, I said. Every 5 minutes you're saying something about how it's boring or childish. Wyatt rolled his eyes slightly. I was just commenting. I know, I said, But if you keep doing that when the big part happens, it's going to ruin it for me. He looked at me like I had just said the most ridiculous thing in the world. So instead, you turn the whole movie off? Yeah, I said. Why? Because I'd rather not watch it at all than watch it while someone is mocking it the whole time. The room went quiet again. Wyatt stared at me for a second like he was trying to decide whether I was serious. Apparently, he decided I was. Then he leaned back on the couch and laughed. Not a happy laugh. More like the kind of laugh people do when they think someone else is being ridiculous. You're kidding, right? No, Emily, he said, shaking his head. It's a movie. I know it's a movie. Then why are you acting like this? Like what? Like a baby, he said. That word hit a little harder than I expected. I stared at him. I'm not acting like a baby. Yes, you are, he said. You literally turned the TV off because I said the movie was boring. That's not what happened. He gestured toward the blank screen. Then turn it back on. No, come on, he said, holding his hand out for the remote. Stop being dramatic and just play it. I kept the remote in my lap. I'm not turning it back on. Wyatt stared at me for a few seconds. Seriously? Yeah. He leaned forward slightly. So, what? We're just done now. I shrugged. If you want to watch something else, you can pick. He frowned. You're giving up on your movie. I already told you why, I said. I don't want it ruined. Wyatt shook his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. This is insane. It's really not. It is, he said. You're making a huge deal out of nothing. I'm really not trying to make a huge deal out of anything, I said. I just turned the movie off. Yeah, he said, which is weird. I didn't argue with that. Instead, I just said, if you want to watch something else, go ahead. I set the remote on the coffee table between us. Wyatt didn't pick up the remote. Instead, he stood up. Oh my God, he said under his breath. Then louder, he said. If you're going to act like this, I don't want to watch anything with you. I blinked. Okay. He stared at me for another second like he expected me to chase after him or apologize. I didn't. So, he turned around and walked down the hallway toward the bedroom. A second later, the door slammed. Not just closed. Slammed. The sound echoed through my apartment. I sat there on the couch staring at the blank TV screen. The popcorn bowl was still sitting on the coffee table. The remote was right next to it. And the movie I had been excited to watch was still paused somewhere in the middle of the story. Except now the whole evening felt ruined anyway. After Wyatt slammed the bedroom door, the rest of that night was just quiet. Not peaceful quiet. That heavy kind of quiet where you know someone in the next room is angry. I didn't go after him. Partly because I was annoyed, but mostly because I genuinely didn't think what I did was that big of a deal. I just figured we'd both cool off and talk about it later. Eventually, he came out of the bedroom, grabbed his backpack, and left. He didn't say anything to me. Not bye, not see you later. Nothing. The door closed behind him, and that was it. The next day, I texted him like normal. Hey, did you get home okay? He replied with a simple yeah. That was it. Over the next couple of days, the vibe between us was weird. If I texted him something normal, like, how's work? He'd respond with one-word answers. Fine. Busy. Yep. When we talked on the phone, it wasn't much better. Short answers, long pauses. At one point, I asked him if he wanted to come over that weekend, and he just said, we'll see. It was obvious he was still annoyed, but he never actually said why. He just let the silence sit there like some kind of punishment. After about 3 days of that, I finally decided to just address it directly. I called him one evening after work. He answered on the third ring. Hey, he said. Hey. There was a small pause. Then I said, are you still mad about the movie thing? Another pause. Then he said, you mean when you made me feel like dirt? That caught me off guard. What? You heard me. How did I make you feel like dirt? Wyatt scoffed. You basically treated me like I was ruining your life because I didn't like your stupid movie. That's not what happened. It kind of is. I sat down at my kitchen table while we talked. Wyatt, I just turned the movie off. Exactly. He said, you made this huge dramatic scene over nothing. I didn't make a scene. Yes, you did. He said, you literally shut the whole thing down because I made a couple comments. A couple comments? He ignored that. You made me feel like I was some kind of jerk just for saying what I thought. I rubbed my forehead. That's not what I was trying to do. Well, that's what you did, he said. So, yeah, I think you owe me an apology. There it was. He wasn't just annoyed. He expected me to apologize. After that conversation, I started thinking about things more than I had before. Not just about the movie night, about everything. When you're in a relationship for a while, you kind of get used to certain patterns. Little things happen and you brush them off because they don't seem worth fighting about. But once I started replaying things in my head, a lot of moments started coming back. Times where Wyatt dismissed something I liked. Times where he made comments that seemed small at the moment, but felt different when I looked back at them. Like the time I showed him a book I really loved and he said, "You still read stuff like this?" Or when I wanted to watch a show I liked and he said, "We can, but it's probably going to be dumb." Even with the movie nights, it had slowly turned into this weird dynamic where I felt like I had to defend my choices before we even started watching. I started noticing something else, too. When it was his turn to pick something, I never did that. I never mocked it. I never made him feel like his interests were stupid. But somehow when it came to my choices, he always had something negative to say. At the time, I told myself he was just being honest or that I was being sensitive. But after that phone call where he said I made him feel like dirt, I started wondering if maybe the problem wasn't the movie at all. Maybe it was the way he treated things that mattered to me. And that thought stuck with me more than I expected. After a couple more days of awkward texting and short conversations, I decided I didn't want to keep doing this weird half-argument where nothing actually got resolved. So, I asked Wyatt if he could come over after work one evening. He showed up around 7 o'clock. The whole vibe felt off immediately. Normally when he came over, he'd hug me or at least say something casual like, "What's up?" But this time, he just walked in, dropped his keys on the counter, and sat down on the couch like he was waiting for something. I sat across from him in the chair near the coffee table. "Can we talk for a minute?" I asked. He sighed. "About the movie again?" "Yeah." He leaned back into the couch cushions like he already knew he wasn't going to enjoy the conversation. "Fine," he said. I tried really hard to keep my voice calm. "I'm not trying to fight," I said. "I just want to explain why I turned the movie off." Wyatt crossed his arms, but didn't interrupt. "So when it's your turn to pick a movie, I watch it," I said. "Even if I don't love it." He shrugged. "Okay. And I don't sit there pointing out everything I think is wrong with it," I continued. "Because I know you picked it for a reason." Still no response. "But when it's my turn to pick something," I said, "you spend the whole time criticizing it, saying it's boring or childish or slow." Wyatt shifted slightly but stayed quiet. "And it kind of ruins the experience for me," I said, "especially with that movie. I told you it was important to me." I paused for a second to make sure he was listening. "I'm not saying you have to love everything I pick. I said I just want you to watch it without tearing it apart the whole time." For a moment I thought maybe he actually understood because he didn't interrupt me while I was talking. But then he spoke. "Emily," he said slowly. "You're being dramatic again." That word again. I felt my stomach tighten. "I'm not being dramatic." "You are," he said. "It's literally just movies." "I know it's just movies." "Then why are we having a serious talk about it like this?" "Because it's not just the movie," I said. "It's how you act about the things I like." Wyatt laughed under his breath. "Your movie choices suck," he said. The way he said it wasn't joking. It was blunt, like a statement of fact. I blinked at him. "What?" "I'm just being honest," he said. "Most of the stuff you pick is boring." "That's not the point." "No, it kind of is." He said, "You're mad that I don't pretend your movies are amazing." "I never asked you to pretend," I said. "I just asked you not to sit there criticizing them the whole time." Wyatt shook his head. "This is exactly what I mean," he said. "You're making a huge issue out of nothing." At that point, I felt completely drained, like I had spent all this effort trying to explain something and he just didn't care. I took a deep breath. "Okay," I said quietly. Wyatt frowned. "Okay, what?" "I think I just need some space tonight." "What does that mean?" I paused, trying to phrase it carefully. "Maybe you could go back to your apartment for the night so I can think about things." I wasn't trying to kick him out. I just wanted a little quiet, a little distance so I could figure out what I was feeling. But the second the words left my mouth, Wyatt's entire expression changed. His face tightened immediately. What? I'm just asking for a little space tonight? I said. So, because I don't agree with you, now you're kicking me out? That's not what I said. But the tone of the room had already shifted. Wyatt stood up so suddenly the couch shifted behind him. Oh, I see how this is, he said loudly. That's not what You didn't get your way. So now you're kicking me out, he cut in. I'm not kicking you out, I said quickly. I just asked for a little space tonight. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Wyatt started pacing across the living room. You know what this is? He said, you're mad because I didn't pretend your stupid movie was amazing. That's not what this is about. Yes, it is. He snapped. You turned the TV off like a child and now you're still dragging it out days later. I tried to talk about it calmly. You tried to lecture me, he said. I could feel my heart beating faster because the way he was talking was completely different from normal arguments we'd had before. Wyatt had raised his voice before, but he had never yelled like this. Wyatt, just calm down, I said. Oh, don't tell me to calm down. I'm not trying to fight. Well, you should have thought about that before you decided to treat me like garbage over a kid's movie. I stood up from the chair slowly. No one treated you like garbage. You basically told me I'm not allowed to have opinions. That's not what I said. Wyatt threw his hands in the air. Then what are you saying? I'm saying I just wanted you to respect something that mattered to me. That was apparently the wrong thing to say because Wyatt's face hardened instantly. Oh my God, he said, shaking his head. You are unbelievable. Then the insult started. Seriously, Emily, grow up. This is the dumbest argument I've ever been in. You're acting insane right now. Wyatt, stop, I said. But he didn't. He took a step toward me. Then another. I instinctively stepped backward. Everything has to revolve around you, he continued. Your feelings, your movies, your rules. That's not true. Then why am I the bad guy here? You're not the bad guy, I said. I just wanted you to. Before I could finish the sentence, he grabbed my arm. Hard. His hand clamped around my bicep and pulled me back when I tried to step away. Don't walk away while I'm talking to you, he said. The grip shocked me more than the words. Wyatt had never grabbed me like that before. I tried to pull my arm back. Let go. He didn't. Wyatt, let go of me. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he released my arm, but by that point, I was already backing away quickly. My shoulder hit the hallway wall behind me. And suddenly, the whole situation felt dangerous in a way it hadn't before. I didn't argue anymore. I just turned and ran. I went straight into the bathroom and locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone when I grabbed it. Outside the door, I could hear Wyatt's footsteps coming down the hallway. Emily. Then the doorknob rattled. Open the door. I didn't answer. He knocked once, then again, louder. Emily, stop being ridiculous. I slid down against the bathroom wall, my back pressed against the door. My chest felt tight and my hands were still shaking. Then the banging started. Open the door. I couldn't think of anything else to do, so I called my mom. She answered almost immediately. Hey, honey. Mom, I said, my voice shaking. I need help. Emily, what's wrong? Right as she asked that, Wyatt slammed his fist against the bathroom door again. Come out here. My mom went silent for a second. What is that? That's Wyatt, I said. Why is he yelling? I don't know, I said, starting to cry. He grabbed my arm and I locked myself in the bathroom. Put me on speaker, she said immediately. I did. My mom started talking to me calmly while I sat on the floor trying to breathe normally. In the background, Wyatt kept yelling through the door. Emily, this is ridiculous. Stop hiding. My mom must have put the phone down because I could hear my dad's voice faintly on the other end. What's going on? Then she said, David, call the police. About 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door of my apartment. Wyatt went quiet. Then I heard the door open. A man's voice said, Police Department. I stayed locked in the bathroom until one of the officers knocked on the door and told me it was safe to come out. When I opened the door, 2 officers were standing in the hallway. Wyatt was near the living room looking furious, but also suddenly very quiet. The officers spoke to both of us separately. Not long after that, they told Wyatt he needed to leave the apartment. My parents showed up shortly after. My mom hugged me the second she walked through the door, and my dad told Wyatt very clearly not to come back. He said if Wyatt tried contacting me again, we would file for a restraining order. About an hour later, I had packed a small bag. I locked my apartment and left with my parents to stay at their house for a while. And that was the end of my relationship with Wyatt. Looking back, it started with a movie, but it ended with me realizing that disrespect, even in small doses, can escalate into something truly dangerous. It wasn't just about a film. It was about being seen, being heard, and being respected. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had someone dismiss your passions and interests like that? Let me know in the comments below. I'd really love to hear what you think.